The moment Leonard stepped into my tiny tailor shop on Maple Street, I knew something was off. His $1,000 shoes clicked against my worn wooden floor, and he wrinkled his nose at the smell of fabric dye like it personally offended him. He wanted a custom gown for his wife Victoria. Something extraordinary for her 40th birthday, he said. He handed me her measurements, scribbled on expensive stationery, then added with a smirk that still makes my skin crawl, "Make it perfect. She deserves the best. Or at least, that's what she thinks." I should have caught that tone, that cruel edge hiding behind his polished smile. But I was desperate for the commission, and desperation makes you ignore the warning bells screaming in your head. What I didn't know was that taking this job would unravel secrets that would destroy his carefully constructed life, expose a 15-year lie, and prove that karma has a way of stitching justice into the most unexpected seams. My name is Iris, and this is my story. Before we dive deeper into this unbelievable journey, do me a favor and hit that like button if you believe karma always finds a way. And subscribe, because trust me, you won't believe how this ends. I promise you, this is a story about justice, redemption, and discovering that sometimes the smallest thread can unravel the biggest lies. Let me paint you a picture of where I was when all this started. My mother opened her tailor shop on Maple Street 40 years ago, back when this neighborhood was filled with family-owned businesses and people actually knew their neighbors' names. She taught me everything: how to read fabric like poetry, how to make a dress that doesn't just fit a body but celebrates it. When she passed 3 years ago, she left me the shop and a mountain of debt I didn't know existed. I was 34, single, raising my 10-year-old daughter Chloe alone, and watching everything my mother built slowly die around me. Chain stores had moved into the neighborhood, offering alterations for a fraction of what I charged. Big retailers sold dresses for less than my fabric costs. I was 2 months behind on rent. Chloe needed braces that insurance wouldn't cover. And every night I lay awake doing math that never added up. I'd started looking at corporate tailoring jobs, the kind where you stand in a department store basement hemming pants for minimum wage, the kind that would break my mother's heart if she could see it. So yeah, when Leonard Drake walked through my door that Tuesday afternoon, in March, I saw dollar signs before I saw the man. That was my first mistake. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with silver hair styled in that way wealthy men do, casual but clearly expensive. His suit probably cost more than my monthly revenue. He moved through my shop like he was touring a museum of quaint poverty, touching my fabric bolts with 2 fingers like they might contaminate him. "Charming," he said, in a tone that meant anything but very authentic. I remember thinking he was the type of man who used words as weapons, wrapping insults in compliments so tight you didn't feel the cut until later. He got straight to business. His wife, Victoria, was turning 40 in 6 weeks, and he wanted to throw her a birthday gala. He needed a custom evening gown, something spectacular, emerald green to match her eyes. Money was no object, he said. Those were his exact words. Money is no object. To a woman who'd been rationing coffee grounds, those words sounded like salvation. He quoted $8,000 like it was pocket change. $8,000. I could pay rent for 4 months, get Chloe's braces, fix the leak in the shop's ceiling, maybe even have enough left over to breathe for a minute. So when every instinct in my body whispered that something was wrong with this man, I pushed those instincts down deep and smiled professionally. He handed me a piece of heavy stationery with measurements written in sharp, angular handwriting. Bust, waist, hips, inseam, all there. "Victoria won't be able to come for fittings," he said, not looking at me. "She's very busy with her charity work. Incredibly busy. Too busy to care about things like dresses, honestly." The way he said charity work, with that slight sneer, should have been my second warning. "I want this to be a surprise," he continued, "a reminder of what she used to be. When we met, she was a size 4, absolutely stunning. She let herself go a bit, but these measurements should motivate her. He smiled when he said that, and I felt something cold slide down my spine. I should have refused right there. Should have handed back his stationery and his condescending smile and told him to get out. But Chloe needed braces, the landlord needed rent, the electric company needed payment. So I swallowed my disgust and said I'd be honored to make the dress. We shook hands, and his palm was cold and dry, like shaking hands with a snake. He insisted on weekly check-ins to monitor progress, which was unusual, but he was paying enough that I agreed. As he left, he paused at the door and said, "I can tell you understand quality, Iris. That's rare these days, especially in women." Then he was gone, and I stood in my empty shop, feeling like I'd just made a deal with something dark. That night, I spread his measurements across my work table and started sketching. Emerald green, he'd said. Floor length, fitted bodice, dramatic train. I could see it in my mind. Something classic, but modern. Elegant, without being stuffy. I ordered the most beautiful silk I could find. French lace for the bodice. Tiny seed pearls for detail. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. My mother always said that every stitch carries intention. If you sew with resentment, the garment will never sit right. So I tried to push away my discomfort and focus on creating something beautiful for a woman I'd never met, a woman whose husband wanted to motivate her by making her fit into her 25-year-old body. Yeah, the irony wasn't lost on me. Leonard came back exactly 1 week later, carrying expensive coffee in those pretentious cups with the green logo. He'd brought one for me without asking what I wanted, just assumed I'd drink whatever he chose. "Thought you could use something better than whatever you're brewing in that sad little pot," he said, gesturing at my coffee maker like it had personally offended him. He wanted to see the preliminary sketches, but he barely glanced at them. Instead, he asked about me. How long had I owned the shop? Was I married? What did I do for fun? The questions felt invasive, too personal for a client. But I answered politely because $8,000 bought him some conversation, I guess. He started showing up between our scheduled appointments, Tuesday afternoon, then Thursday morning, then Monday during lunch, always with coffee, always staying longer than necessary. He'd lean against my work table while I sewed, making comments that walked the line between friendly and inappropriate. "A woman with your skills, your aesthetic sense, you should be designing for fashion houses in New York or Paris," he'd say, "not stuck in this dying neighborhood making bridesmaid dresses." Or, "I bet you understand beauty in a way Victoria never could. She's become so practical, no imagination anymore." Each visit, the comments about Victoria grew sharper. She'd put on weight. She'd stopped caring about her appearance. She'd become boring, consumed by her charity work with abuse survivors. "She spends all her time with these broken women," he said once, "like she's trying to fix everyone but herself." I started to dread his visits. The way he looked at me made my skin crawl, like I was another thing he could buy if he offered enough. But I needed his money, so I smiled and redirected conversation to the dress. The silk had arrived, and it was gorgeous, shimmering green that shifted in the light like water. I'd started constructing the bodice, and it was coming together beautifully. Leonard ran his fingers over the fabric in a way that felt obscene. "Perfection," he murmured. "Victoria won't know what hit her. She'll see this dress, realize how far she's fallen, and maybe finally make an effort." The cruelty in his voice was naked then, undisguised. He wanted to hurt his wife. This dress wasn't a gift, it was a weapon. That night, I called my elderly neighbor, Mr. Patel. He ran the newsstand on the corner and had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. He'd known my mother, had watched me grow up, and somehow always knew when I needed advice. I told him everything. The measurements, Leonard's comments, the way this whole situation felt poisoned. Mr. Patel was quiet for a long moment, then said in his gentle accent, "Iris, Beta, some men measure their worth by making others feel small. This Leonard, he is trying to purchase your silence with his money. But you are your mother's daughter. You know the difference between right and wrong. The question is, what will you do about it?" What could I do? I was just a seamstress. Leonard was wealthy, powerful, connected. If I confronted him, he'd destroy me. If I refused to finish the dress, he could sue me, destroy my reputation, make sure I never worked in this city again. I felt trapped, complicit in something cruel, and I hated myself for it. But I kept sewing, kept constructing this beautiful green weapon, kept taking Leonard's coffee, and enduring his visits. Week 3 came, and I was fitting the bodice to the dress form, making sure every seam was perfect. The shop was quiet. It was early afternoon, and I'd locked the door to focus. That's when I heard the soft knock. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting clients, and I was behind schedule, but something made me get up and unlock the door. Standing on my worn welcome mat was a woman I didn't recognize. She was maybe 5'6", with warm brown hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, and she had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. She smiled uncertainly and asked if I did alterations. "I'm Victoria Drake," she said, extending her hand. "I heard about your shop from the community board downtown. They said you do beautiful work." I swear my heart stopped. This was Victoria, Leonard's wife, the woman I'd been creating this dress for, this woman he'd described as overweight, boring, and past her prime. But the woman standing in front of me wasn't any of those things. She was lovely. Not in that polished, expensive way Leonard probably preferred, but in a real warm human way. She had laugh lines around her eyes and a genuine smile. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing who you are, not from money or status. I invited her in, my mind racing, my hands suddenly shaking. She wanted a simple cocktail dress, altered for a charity fundraiser she was organizing. As I took her measurements, she chatted easily about her work, running a nonprofit for domestic violence survivors. "We help women escape abusive situations," she explained. "Provide legal aid, temporary housing, job training. It's my whole heart, you know? Some people think it's depressing work, but I find it hopeful. Watching women reclaim their lives, their power, there's nothing more beautiful." She talked about the women she'd helped, the children she'd seen flourish once they were safe. Her face lit up with passion and purpose. This was what Leonard had dismissed as boring. When I wrapped the measuring tape around her waist, my stomach dropped. Size 8. Victoria was a size 8. Not the size 4 Leonard had specified. I checked again, certain I'd made a mistake. But no, the measurements Leonard had given me were at least 2 sizes too small. I'd been constructing a dress that would never fit Victoria's actual body. A dress designed to humiliate her, to squeeze her into dimensions that hadn't been hers in probably 15 years. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. Leonard wasn't trying to surprise his wife. He was trying to destroy her in front of an audience. I must have gone pale because Victoria asked if I was all right. I lied and said I was fine, just tired. She was so kind, so concerned for me, a stranger. As I pinned her dress, she mentioned casually that her 40th birthday was coming up. "Leonard said we're doing something quiet," she said. "Just dinner at home. He knows I hate big parties. I get so anxious in crowds." My mind was spinning. Leonard had told me he was throwing a massive gala, so either he was lying to her or lying to me, probably both. Victoria continued talking, mentioning that Leonard had been distant lately, working late, seeming stressed. "He's under a lot of pressure with his real estate projects," she said, making excuses for him the way people do when they love someone who's hurting them. Before she left, she pulled out her phone to show me pictures of the charity's recent fundraiser. As she scrolled, I caught a glimpse of another photo, Leonard with a young woman, maybe late 20s, rail thin and stunning in that harsh, expensive way. Victoria saw me looking and smiled sadly. That's Natasha, Leonard's business partner. She's brilliant, apparently. I don't see him much anymore because they're always working together. The way she said it, I knew she suspected something. But she was doing what so many people do, ignoring the obvious because acknowledging it would break something that couldn't be repaired. After Victoria left, I stood in my shop surrounded by green silk and growing horror. I pulled out the measurements Leonard had given me and compared them to Victoria's actual size. He'd deliberately given me measurements from years ago, probably from when they first met. He was setting his wife up for public humiliation at a party she didn't even know was happening. And why? To justify leaving her? To break her down so completely she'd accept his affair with Natasha? To make himself look like the long-suffering husband dealing with a wife who'd let herself go? All of the above, probably. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept seeing Victoria's kind face, hearing her talk about helping abuse survivors while having no idea she was married to an abuser. Because that's what Leonard was. Not the hitting kind, maybe, but the slow poison kind. The type who destroys you with words and impossible standards and gaslighting until you don't recognize yourself anymore. I thought about my mother, who'd always said that staying silent in the face of cruelty makes you part of the cruelty. But I also thought about Chloe's braces and my mounting debt and the very real power Leonard had to destroy me. By morning, I'd made a decision. I went to Mr. Patel's newsstand before he opened and told him everything. Victoria's visit, the wrong measurements, my suspicions about Leonard's intentions. Mr. Patel listened carefully, then said something I'll never forget. Beta, sometimes the truth needs a gentle hand to guide it into the light. You cannot force revelation, but you can create conditions where truth reveals itself. He smiled at me, that knowing smile that made you feel like everything might actually be okay. So 2 dresses, Iris, one for Leonard's lie, one for Victoria's truth. Let the moment decide which one she wears. It was brilliant and terrifying. I'd make 2 dresses, one to Leonard's specifications, guaranteed not to fit, and one to Victoria's actual measurements, designed to make her look absolutely stunning. I'd have to do it secretly, absorbing the extra material and labor costs myself. It would take every spare hour I had, but it felt right. It felt like the kind of thing my mother would have done. So I got to work, sewing through the nights after Chloe went to bed, creating 2 versions of the same design. The size 4 was technically perfect, but would never fit Victoria's real body. The size 8 was a masterpiece. I poured everything I knew about tailoring into making Victoria look powerful, beautiful, absolutely radiant. Leonard came for his check-ins, and I showed him the size 4 dress taking shape. He ran his hands over it with satisfaction, already imagining his wife's humiliation. Perfect, he kept saying. Absolutely perfect. His visits had become even more uncomfortable. He'd started touching my shoulder when he talked, standing too close, making comments about how I was different from other women and understood things Victoria never could. Once, her left, he said, "When this is all over, maybe you and I could have dinner. Discuss future projects." The implication was clear and revolting. He thought he could buy me, use me to make his dress, then discard his wife, and move on to his next acquisition. I played along, smiled politely, and kept sewing. The size 8 dress was hidden in the back of my shop, covered in plain muslin, looking like just another project. I worked on it in secret, and with every stitch, I felt like I was sewing justice into the seams. But I knew I couldn't do this alone. Victoria needed to know what her husband was planning. She needed to be ready. And I needed to tell her the truth, even if it meant losing Leonard's money and facing his wrath. 4 weeks before the supposed party, I called Victoria. My hands shook as I dialed the number she'd left for the dress alteration. When she answered, I told her I had some concerns about the cocktail dress fitting and asked if she could come by the shop. She agreed immediately, always so kind, so accommodating. When she arrived that evening, after I'd closed the shop, I locked the door behind her and asked her to sit down. "Victoria," I said, "I need to tell you something about your husband." And you're not going to want to hear it. I told her everything. The commission for the gala dress, Leonard's weekly visits, and inappropriate comments. The measurements that were 2 sizes too small. His cruel remarks about her appearance and worth. I showed her the size 4 dress and explained it would never fit her actual body. Victoria's face went through a journey as I talked. Confusion, disbelief, hurt, and finally, a terrible recognition. I knew, she whispered. Some part of me always knew, but hearing it said out loud. She started crying, not loud sobs, but quiet tears that broke my heart. He's been telling me for years that I've gained weight, that I'm not attractive anymore, that I embarrass him. I started believing it, started thinking maybe I was the problem. We sat together in my shop, 2 women who'd been strangers weeks ago, and I watched Victoria transform before my eyes. The tears stopped, and something harder, stronger, took their place. "Tell me about this gala," she said quietly. So I did. I told her Leonard had said it was a surprise party for her 40th birthday, that he was inviting 150 people, that the dress was meant to be unveiled in front of everyone. Victoria's jaw tightened. He told me we were having a quiet dinner at home. He knows I have social anxiety. He knows crowds terrify me. This isn't just humiliation. He's weaponizing my fears. Then Victoria started talking, and what she revealed made everything so much worse. She'd inherited a substantial fortune from her grandparents, several $1,000,000 that she'd put in a trust. Leonard had access as her spouse, but only while they were married. If they divorced, he got nothing. "I've been noticing discrepancies in the trust statements," she said. "Money moving in ways I don't understand." When I asked Leonard about it, he told me I was too stupid to understand finance, that I should stick to my charity work and let him handle the real money. She'd started secretly collecting the statements, sensing something was wrong, but not knowing what. "And Natasha," Victoria continued, her voice hardening, "is not his business partner. She's a junior agent in his firm. 28 years old, fresh out of business school. I've seen the way he looks at her. We made a plan that night. Victoria would go home and act normal, suspecting nothing. She'd hire a forensic accountant to examine the trust, a lawyer to prepare divorce papers, and start documenting everything. I'd finish both dresses and stay in contact with Victoria, feeding her information from Leonard's visits. We'd let him think his plan was working perfectly, and when the night of the gala came, we'd be ready with our own surprise. It was risky and terrifying, and there were 1,000 ways it could go wrong. But watching Victoria's face shift from broken to determined, I knew we had to try. "He thinks he's been measuring me for years," Victoria said as she left that night. "My worth, my size, my value. It's time someone measured him." Over the next 4 weeks, everything Leonard had built started to unravel, though he had no idea. Victoria's forensic accountant discovered he'd been embezzling from her trust for 3 years, small amounts at first, then increasingly bold thefts. Total theft, $2.3 million, money he'd used to fund his lifestyle, invest in properties he put in his name only, and apparently set up Natasha in a luxury apartment downtown. Victoria's lawyer found evidence of the affair: hotels, trips, jewelry purchases, text messages between Leonard and Natasha discussing Victoria in degrading terms, making fun of her charity work, her appearance, her naivety, planning their future together once Leonard was free. But it got darker. Victoria found emails that suggested Leonard had been exploring ways to have Victoria declared mentally incompetent. He'd been documenting normal behavior as concerning. Her anxiety in social situations became agoraphobia. Her careful budgeting became paranoia about money. Her dedication to her nonprofit became unhealthy obsession. He'd even consulted with a doctor friend about the process of getting someone involuntarily committed. The plan seemed to be humiliate Victoria at the gala, use her public breakdown as evidence of instability, get control of her trust, then have her quietly institutionalized while he played the devoted husband. It was sociopathic, it was evil, and we had to stop it. Meanwhile, Leonard continued his weekly visits to my shop, oblivious to the trap closing around him. He brought coffee, made inappropriate comments, and obsessively checked on the dress. Victoria's been acting strange, he mentioned once. Very quiet, very agreeable. I think she knows something's coming. Good, maybe it'll motivate her to finally make an effort. The narcissism was breathtaking. Even as he destroyed his wife, he believed he was helping her. He'd convinced himself he was the victim, married to a woman who'd disappointed him, forced to seek happiness elsewhere, simply trying to recover what was rightfully his money. The size 4 dress was completed 2 weeks before the gala. It was beautiful, I won't lie. The emerald silk caught light like water. The lace bodice was intricate and delicate. The train flowed like a river. On a size 4 body, it would have been stunning. On Victoria's size 8 frame, it would be unwearable. Leonard examined every inch and declared it perfect. She'll see this and remember what she used to be, he said with satisfaction. Maybe it'll wake her up. He paid me in full, $8,000 in a check that felt like blood money. As he left, he touched my face and said, "After Saturday, I'll be a free man. We should celebrate together." I smiled and said nothing, letting him believe whatever he wanted to believe. The size 8 dress was my secret masterpiece. I'd worked on it late at night, pouring every skill my mother had taught me into creating something extraordinary. Same emerald silk, same design, but cut for Victoria's real body. I'd modified the bodice to highlight her actual figure. Strong shoulders, gentle curves, natural waist. The dress didn't try to hide her body or squeeze it into some impossible ideal. It celebrated her exactly as she was. When I finally finished it, 3 days before the gala, I hung it in my back room and just stared at it. This dress was everything Leonard's wasn't. It was honest. It was kind. It said, "You are enough exactly as you are." Victoria came to see both dresses the day before the gala. We stood in my shop, looking at them side by side. The lie and the truth hanging on their forms. "Which one should I wear?" she asked softly. I told her the truth. "The size 4 will expose Leonard's cruelty to everyone at that party. You won't be able to zip it. You'll be humiliated in front of 150 people, but everyone will see what he intended." Victoria touched the size 4 dress gently. "And the size 8? I smiled. "The size 8 will make you look like the powerful, beautiful woman you actually are. It'll ruin his narrative. He's been telling people you've let yourself go, that you're depressed and unstable. But if you walk out in that dress, looking absolutely stunning, confident, and in control, his whole story falls apart." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she started to laugh. Not a bitter laugh, but something lighter, freer. "I'm going to wear the size 8, she said, "and I'm going to walk into that party and destroy him." We spent the next hour going over the plan. Victoria had invited her lawyer, the forensic accountant, a detective from the fraud division, and 3 reporters to the gala. She'd sent invitations separately from Leonard's, so he had no idea. She'd also sent one to Natasha with a note saying Leonard wanted her there as a surprise. Everything was set. All we had to do was wait for Saturday night. I won't lie, I barely slept Friday night. I kept imagining all the ways this could go wrong. Leonard could cancel the party. Victoria could lose her nerve. The dress could rip or stain. 1,000 disasters played through my mind. But Saturday arrived, bright and clear, and at 3 o'clock, Victoria came to my shop for the final fitting. I helped her into the size 8 dress, and when she looked at herself in my full-length mirror, she started crying. "I forgot," she whispered. "I forgot I could look like this, feel like this." He spent so long telling me I was ugly and worthless that I started believing it. I fixed her makeup, adjusted the dress one final time, and told her what my mother used to tell me. "You carry your worth in your heart, not your measurements. Never forget that." The gala was at the Ashford Hotel, one of those historic buildings with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Leonard had rented the entire ballroom. Clearly, Victoria's money had been useful for that. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Victoria insisted I come as her personal guest. "You're part of this story," she said. "You should see how it ends." So I put on my nicest dress, dropped Chloe at Mr. Patel's for the evening, and drove downtown with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I arrived early and positioned myself in a corner where I could see everything. The ballroom filled quickly with guests, Leonard's business associates, country club friends, people from Victoria's charity board. Everyone dressed expensively, drinking champagne, making small talk. I spotted Natasha immediately. She was hard to miss, in a tight red dress that screamed "other woman." She kept looking around nervously, clearly uncertain why she'd been invited. Leonard's business partners were there too, including some men whose names I recognized from the news. And scattered through the crowd were Victoria's secret guests, her lawyer in a conservative suit, the forensic accountant looking uncomfortable in formal wear, the detective trying to blend in, and the reporters with cameras hidden in their bags. At 7 o'clock sharp, Leonard took the stage. He looked presidential in his tuxedo, every inch the successful man throwing a lavish party for his beloved wife. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Victoria's 40th birthday," he began, and the crowd applauded politely. "My wife is an extraordinary woman, though she doesn't always see it herself. She's spent the last 15 years of our marriage dedicating herself to charity work, helping others, sometimes at the expense of herself." He paused, and I could hear the subtle criticism woven into the compliment. "So tonight, I wanted to remind Victoria, and all of you, of the stunning woman I married, the woman she can still be." He gestured dramatically toward the back of the ballroom, where a curtained area had been set up. "Victoria, darling, would you join me?" The crowd turned, and I held my breath. The curtains parted, and Victoria stepped out. But she wasn't wearing the size 4 dress. She was wearing my size 8 masterpiece, and she looked absolutely magnificent. The emerald silk moved with her like water. The bodice fit perfectly, highlighting her figure without exaggerating or hiding anything. Her hair was styled elegantly, her makeup subtle but striking. She looked powerful, confident, beautiful. She looked like a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. The crowd gasped and applauded, clearly impressed. But Leonard's face went white, then red, then purple. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't his dress, though it clearly was the same design. But it fit. It fit perfectly. His narrative of the overweight, sloppy wife who'd let herself go was evaporating before his eyes. Victoria crossed the ballroom to join him on stage, moving with grace and certainty. She took the microphone from his hand before he could react. "I won't lie, I barely slept Friday night. I kept imagining all the ways this could go wrong. Leonard could cancel the party. Victoria could lose her nerve. The dress could rip or stain. 1,000 disasters played through my mind. But Saturday arrived, bright and clear, and at 3 o'clock, Victoria came to my shop for the final fitting. I helped her into the size 8 dress, and when she looked at herself in my full-length mirror, she started crying. "I forgot," she whispered. "I forgot I could look like this, feel like this." He spent so long telling me I was ugly and worthless that I started believing it. I fixed her makeup, adjusted the dress one final time, and told her what my mother used to tell me: "You carry your worth in your heart, not your measurements. Never forget that." The gala was at the Ashford Hotel, one of those historic buildings with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Leonard had rented the entire ballroom. Clearly, Victoria's money had been useful for that. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Victoria insisted I come as her personal guest. "You're part of this story," she said. "You should see how it ends." So I put on my nicest dress, dropped Chloe at Mr. Patel's for the evening, and drove downtown with my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I arrived early and positioned myself in a corner where I could see everything. The ballroom filled quickly with guests, Leonard's business associates, country club friends, people from Victoria's charity board. Everyone dressed expensively, drinking champagne, making small talk. I spotted Natasha immediately. She was hard to miss, in a tight red dress that screamed "other woman." She kept looking around nervously, clearly uncertain why she'd been invited. Leonard's business partners were there too, including some men whose names I recognized from the news. And scattered through the crowd were Victoria's secret guests, her lawyer in a conservative suit, the forensic accountant looking uncomfortable in formal wear, the detective trying to blend in, and the reporters with cameras hidden in their bags. At 7 o'clock sharp, Leonard took the stage. He looked presidential in his tuxedo, every inch the successful man throwing a lavish party for his beloved wife. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Victoria's 40th birthday," he began. And the crowd applauded politely. "My wife is an extraordinary woman, though she doesn't always see it herself. She's spent the last 15 years of our marriage dedicating herself to charity work, helping others, sometimes at the expense of herself." He paused, and I could hear the subtle criticism woven into the compliment. "So tonight, I wanted to remind Victoria, and all of you, of the stunning woman I married, the woman she can still be." He gestured dramatically toward the back of the ballroom, where a curtained area had been set up. "Victoria, darling, would you join me?" The crowd turned, and I held my breath. The curtains parted, and Victoria stepped out. But she wasn't wearing the size 4 dress. She was wearing my size 8 masterpiece, and she looked absolutely magnificent. The emerald silk moved with her like water. The bodice fit perfectly, highlighting her figure without exaggerating or hiding anything. Her hair was styled elegantly, her makeup subtle but striking. She looked powerful, confident, beautiful. She looked like a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. The crowd gasped and applauded, clearly impressed. But Leonard's face went white, then red, then purple. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't his dress, though it clearly was the same design. But it fit. It fit perfectly. His narrative of the overweight, sloppy wife who'd let herself go was evaporating before his eyes. Victoria crossed the ballroom to join him on stage, moving with grace and certainty. She took the microphone from his hand before he could react. "Thank you, Leonard," she said, her voice steady and clear. "What a thoughtful surprise. A party I specifically asked you not to throw because you know I have severe social anxiety. How considerate." The crowd went quiet. That wasn't the tone of a grateful wife. Leonard tried to take back the microphone, but Victoria stepped away from him. "Since we're all here, and since Leonard has made this public, I have a few things I'd like to share." She pulled papers from a small clutch she'd been carrying. "Leonard commissioned this dress through a local seamstress named Iris. She's here tonight, and she does beautiful work." She gestured toward me, and suddenly 100 pairs of eyes were on me. Leonard provided measurements for me. The only problem was, they were measurements from 15 years ago, 2 sizes too small. This dress was designed to not fit me, to humiliate me in front of all of you. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Leonard was shaking his head, trying to speak, but Victoria continued. "Fortunately, I found out about this plan. Iris, being a woman of integrity, told me the truth. So we made 2 dresses. The one Leonard wanted, which would have left me struggling to breathe and feeling ashamed. And this one, cut for my actual body, designed to help me feel beautiful as I actually am. I chose this one." The applause was scattered and confused. People weren't sure what was happening, whether this was part of the entertainment or something else. Victoria wasn't done. "Now you might be wondering why a husband would want to humiliate his wife at her own birthday party. I wondered the same thing, so I did some investigating." She nodded toward the lawyer, who pulled out a laptop and started setting up a projector. "Over the past 3 years, my husband has embezzled $2.3 million from my family trust. He's used that money to fund properties, investments, and a lifestyle that includes supporting his mistress." The projected screen lit up with bank statements, transfer records, property deeds. The crowd was no longer confused. They were riveted. Leonard lunged for the laptop, but the detective stepped forward, blocking him. "I'd stay right there, Mr. Drake," the detective said calmly. Victoria continued, her voice never wavering. Leonard has also been having an affair with Natasha Crawford, a junior agent in his firm. Natasha, honey, you're here tonight. Come on up. Natasha looked like she wanted to sink through the floor, but the crowd parted, and she had nowhere to hide. Don't be shy, Victoria said. You've been sleeping with my husband for 2 years, texting about how pathetic I am, planning your future with my money. The least you can do is take a bow. The room erupted. People were talking, gasping, pulling out phones. Leonard was shouting, calling Victoria crazy, demanding she stop. But Victoria simply turned up the microphone volume. Here's the thing, Leonard. You spent 15 years making me feel small, telling me I was fat, stupid, boring, worthless. You isolated me, criticized me, gaslit me until I didn't trust my own perception of reality. You tried to make me believe I was lucky you stayed with me, that I should be grateful for your cruelty. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. But I'm not crazy. I'm not worthless, and I'm not your victim anymore. The projection changed to text messages between Leonard and Natasha. Vile, degrading things about Victoria, about her body, her intelligence, her charity work. Plans for how Leonard would divorce Victoria and take her money. References to breaking her down and making her grateful for any attention. The crowd read in silence, and I watched Leonard's reputation crumble in real time. His business partners were looking at him with disgust. His country club friends were backing away. Even Natasha was staring at the screen, like she'd never seen those messages before, though she'd written half of them. But wait, there's more, Victoria said, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of the moment. This should have been tragic, but Victoria was handling it with such strength that it felt almost empowering. Leonard hasn't just been stealing and cheating. He's been working with a doctor friend to have me declared mentally incompetent. He's been documenting my normal behavior as signs of instability, planning to have me institutionalized so he could take full control of my trust. There are emails, consultations, a whole paper trail. More documents appeared on the screen. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were witnessing a complete destruction of a man's life. Leonard finally found his voice. She's lying, he shouted. She's unstable. She's making this up. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I've been documenting. He turned to his business partners, his friends, desperately. You all know me. You know I'm a successful businessman, a respected member of this community. My wife has mental health issues, and now she's having some kind of breakdown in public. This is why I needed that dress, to help her, to motivate her. But no one was buying it. The evidence was too clear, too detailed, too damning. The detective stepped forward then, badge visible. Leonard Drake, I'm placing you under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Leonard's face went through every emotion: shock, rage, fear, disbelief. He looked at Natasha for support, but she was crying, mascara running down her face. He looked at his business partners, but they'd turned their backs. He looked at Victoria, and I saw him try one last manipulation. Victoria, honey, please, don't do this. I love you. I was trying to help you. You need help. Victoria looked at him with something like pity. No, Leonard, I don't need help. I need a divorce. And you need to face consequences for once in your life. As the detective led Leonard away in handcuffs, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Reporters were taking photos. Guests were talking over each other. Natasha was being escorted out by security. Victoria stood on that stage, in her beautiful green dress, and she looked like a warrior. She looked like someone who'd walked through fire and come out stronger. I made my way through the crowd to her, and when she saw me, she grabbed my hand so tightly it hurt. We did it, she whispered. Oh my God, Iris, we actually did it. The reporters swarmed around us, cameras flashing, questions flying from every direction. Mrs. Drake, how long have you known about the affair? Will you be pressing charges? What made you suspect your husband was embezzling? Victoria handled each question with grace, never losing her composure, never letting them see her shake. She told them about discovering the truth, about my role in exposing Leonard's plan, about the two dresses. She held up the size 4 dress that had been waiting backstage and explained how it was designed to humiliate her. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Here was physical evidence of psychological abuse, cruelty made tangible in silk and lace. One reporter asked if she was afraid of Leonard, if she worried about retaliation. Victoria's answer made my throat tight. "I've been afraid of Leonard for 15 years, she said quietly. Afraid of disappointing him, afraid of his anger, afraid of being without him, because he convinced me I was worthless. But standing here tonight, I realized the only thing truly frightening was losing myself. I'm not afraid anymore. I have evidence, legal protection, and most importantly, I have the truth. Leonard's weapon was making me doubt my reality. That weapon is gone now. The party, if you could still call it that, continued in a surreal way. Some guests left immediately, scandalized or uncomfortable. But others stayed, and the strangest thing happened. They gathered around Victoria, women mostly, coming up to quietly share their own stories. A woman in a silver dress whispered about her own husband's gaslighting. A charity board member talked about leaving an emotionally abusive marriage. Even some of Leonard's business partners approached to apologize, admitting they'd suspected his embezzling, but hadn't wanted to get involved. It was like Victoria's courage had given everyone permission to speak truths they'd been carrying in silence. I stayed by Victoria's side all night, watching her transform from a woman who'd been systematically destroyed into someone radiant with power reclaimed. Around midnight, as the last guest trickled out, she kicked off her heels and sat down on the stage stairs, emerald silk pooling around her. "I keep waiting to feel sad," she said. "I was married to him for 15 years. I loved him, or I thought I did. But all I feel is relief, like I've been holding my breath underwater and someone finally pulled me up." I sat beside her, and we stayed there in the empty ballroom. Two women who'd started as strangers and somehow become warriors together. Mr. Patel was waiting up when I picked up Chloe that night. He took one look at my face and smiled. "The truth came to light?" he asked. I nodded, and he patted my hand gently. "Your mother would be proud, Beta. You used your gift not just to make beautiful things, but to reveal beautiful truths." I drove home with Chloe asleep in the back seat, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I'd done something that actually mattered. Not just survived another day, but genuinely made a difference in someone's life. The aftermath came fast and brutal for Leonard. The story broke everywhere: local news, national outlets, even some international coverage, because the symbolism of the two dresses was too perfect for journalists to resist. "Man orders too small dress to humiliate wife, gets arrested instead," read one headline. "The dress that exposed $1 million fraud," said another. Leonard's face was everywhere, and not in the way he'd always craved. His real estate business collapsed within days. His partners discovered he'd been defrauding them too, using company funds for personal expenses, inflating property values, forging documents. The investigation expanded, revealing a pattern of financial crimes going back a decade. Natasha, to her credit, or maybe just to save herself, cooperated fully with prosecutors. She turned over emails, text messages, recordings of conversations where Leonard had explicitly discussed his plans to control Victoria's money. In exchange for immunity, she testified about everything: the affair, Leonard's verbal abuse of Victoria, his obsession with appearances, his rage when Victoria wouldn't lose weight and look presentable. She admitted Leonard had promised to marry her once he'd secured Victoria's fortune, that she'd believed his lies about Victoria being mentally ill and abusive. In court documents, she described Leonard as manipulative, calculating, and obsessed with wealth and status, above all else, including human decency. The trial took months to prepare, and I watched Victoria navigate it with increasing strength. She threw herself into her nonprofit, and the publicity from the scandal actually helped. Donations poured in from women who saw themselves in her story. Her organization expanded to include financial literacy programs, legal aid for abuse survivors, and workshops on recognizing emotional abuse. Victoria became a sought-after speaker, telling her story at conferences and fundraisers. She was always careful to credit me, always mentioned the 2 dresses, always emphasized that escaping abuse requires both courage and community. Leonard, meanwhile, spiraled. His lawyers tried every strategy, claiming Victoria had fabricated evidence, that he was the real victim of a vindictive wife, that his mental health made him not responsible for his actions. None of it worked. The paper trail was too extensive, the witnesses too credible, the evidence too damning. In November, 8 months after that ballroom confrontation, Leonard Drake was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. He also faced civil charges and was ordered to return every penny he'd stolen from Victoria's trust, plus damages. It wasn't enough to truly bankrupt him, but it was close. I went to the sentencing. Victoria had asked me to come, said she needed a friend there. We sat in the courtroom and watched Leonard in his orange jumpsuit, so different from the polished man who'd walked into my shop. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Leonard stood and blamed everyone but himself. Victoria was vindictive. Natasha had seduced him. His business partners had betrayed him. His lawyer had failed him. Even I got mentioned. I was a jealous seamstress who'd poisoned his wife against him for attention. The narcissism was breathtaking. 8 years in prison, his reputation destroyed, his life in ruins, and he still couldn't admit he'd done anything wrong. When it was Victoria's turn to make a victim impact statement, she walked to the podium with her head high. Leonard Drake spent 15 years trying to make me small, she said. He criticized my body, my intelligence, my work, my worth. He made me believe I was lucky he stayed with me. He stole my money, cheated on me, and planned to have me institutionalized. He commissioned a dress designed to humiliate me in front of everyone I knew. His goal was to break me so completely that I'd accept anything he did to me. She paused, looking directly at Leonard. But I'm standing here today, whole and free and happy, and you're going to prison. So I guess we both got what we deserved. The judge, a woman in her 60s, added her own thoughts before adjourning. Mr. Drake, in my 30 years on the bench, I've seen many abusers. The ones who leave bruises often face justice swiftly. But men like you, who use words and money and psychological torture, often escape consequences because your abuse is harder to prove. This case is significant because Mrs. Drake found tangible evidence of your cruelty in the form of a dress designed to harm her. That dress, combined with your documented fraud, paints a picture of a man who saw his wife as property to be controlled and discarded. I hope you spend your time in prison reflecting on the fact that trying to make someone else small only reveals how small you truly are. Life moved forward after that. Victoria's divorce was finalized quickly. Leonard signed everything from prison, probably hoping cooperation might reduce his sentence. It didn't. Victoria got back her money, her freedom, and custody of her own narrative. She started dating again about a year later, a quiet professor of social work who treated her with respect and kindness. She brought him to meet me once, and I approved immediately. He looked at her the way everyone should be looked at, like she was valuable exactly as she was, not as some project to be improved or possession to be managed. My shop experienced its own transformation. The publicity from Victoria's case brought me more business than I could handle. Women came from all over the city wanting that seamstress who helped expose the abuser. I had to hire 2 assistants just to keep up with orders. Victoria insisted on investing and expanding the shop, turning the 2nd floor into a training center where we taught sewing skills to women from her nonprofit. We called it Stitching New Beginnings, and watching those women learn a trade, gain confidence, create beautiful things with their own hands, It was the most rewarding work I'd ever done. Chloe got her braces, and I finally paid off all my mother's debt. The shop that had been dying became thriving, not just financially but spiritually. It became a place where women gathered, shared stories, supported each other. Mr. Patel still ran his newsstand next door, and he'd send customers my way with a knowing smile. "Go see Iris," he'd tell them. "She doesn't just fix clothes, she fixes hearts." It was corny, but somehow true. My mother's shop, which I'd almost lost, became exactly what she'd always wanted it to be. A place that served the community, that mattered beyond just commerce. The two dresses became symbols. Victoria donated the size 4 to a museum exhibit on domestic abuse awareness. It hung there with a placard explaining its purpose: to humiliate and control. Next to it, the museum displayed photos of Victoria in the size 8 dress, radiant and powerful. The exhibit was called "Measured the Hidden Violence of Impossible Standards," and it toured nationally. Women lined up to see it, to read Victoria's story, to understand that abuse isn't always physical. Some of them left crying, some left angry, many left determined to change their own situations. I got letters from women all over the country. Some thanked me for helping Victoria. Others shared their own stories of emotional abuse, gaslighting, partners who made them feel worthless. A few asked for advice on how to escape. I answered every single one, and when I could, I connected them with Victoria's organization. It became clear that Victoria's story wasn't unique. It was devastatingly common. The difference was that she'd found a way out and made that path visible for others. Leonard's time in prison was reportedly difficult. Inmates don't like men who abuse women, and guards tend to look the other way when such men face accidents. I didn't feel good about that exactly, but I didn't feel bad either. He'd shown no remorse, no understanding of the harm he'd caused. In prison interviews, he still claimed to be the victim, still blamed Victoria for overreacting. Even locked away, he couldn't see the truth about himself. Some people, I learned, are so committed to their own narrative that reality becomes irrelevant. Natasha disappeared from public life. She'd moved to another state, changed her name, tried to start over. I saw her once, about 2 years after the trial, in a coffee shop downtown. She was thinner than before, tired-looking, dressed plainly. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw shame and regret in her face. She left quickly without ordering. I wondered if she'd learned anything, if she understood how she'd participated in Victoria's abuse, if she'd ever take responsibility. I hoped so, but I doubted it. Some people would rather forget than face what they've done. 3 years after that night in the ballroom, Victoria invited me to speak at a conference for abuse survivors. I was terrified. I'm a seamstress, not a public speaker, but she insisted I had an important perspective. "You saw something wrong and did something about it," she said. "That's what we need more of in the world. Witnesses who don't stay silent." So I stood on that stage in front of 500 women and told my story about the measurements that didn't match, the cruel comments, the moral dilemma I'd faced, about choosing to act despite my fear, despite the potential costs. The response was overwhelming. Women approached me afterward with tears in their eyes, thanking me for caring about a stranger. But here's what I tried to explain to them. Victoria wasn't a stranger by the time I made my choice. She was a woman who walked into my shop and showed me kindness. She was someone whose passion for helping others reminded me of my mother. She was a human being who deserved dignity. And I'd been raised to believe that protecting dignity matters more than protecting comfort. I didn't do anything heroic. I did what anyone should do when they see cruelty happening. I refused to participate in it. Mr. Patel passed away in his sleep 4 years after everything happened. He was 72 and had lived a good life. At his funeral, dozens of people from the neighborhood spoke about his wisdom, his kindness, his ability to see the best in everyone. I shared the advice he'd given me that night when I didn't know what to do. Sometimes the truth needs a gentle hand to guide it into the light. Those words had changed everything. They'd given me permission to act, to trust my instincts, to choose courage over comfort. His family asked me to have his quote engraved on his headstone. It reads, "The smallest light can guide truth home." Chloe is 16 now, and she works in the shop after school. She's learning to sew, carrying on my mother's legacy into a third generation. Sometimes Victoria stops by to visit, and I watch Chloe listen to her story with wide eyes. "You really stood up to a man who wanted to hurt you?" Chloe asked once. Victoria smiled. "Your mother stood up first," she said. "She showed me it was possible." That's what courage does. It multiplies. One person's bravery gives someone else permission to be brave too. I hope Chloe remembers that. I hope she grows up knowing that standing up for what's right isn't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's just refusing to sew a dress you know will cause harm. Leonard was released on parole last month after serving 6 years. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he's living in a small apartment across town, working a minimum wage job, prohibited from working in finance or real estate. His social circle has vanished. His country club membership was revoked. His name is permanently associated with fraud and abuse. I don't know if he's learned anything, or if he's still blaming everyone else for his choices. I don't really care. He's become irrelevant, not because of his poverty or fall from status, but because his power to harm is gone. The truth is public now, permanent and undeniable. Victoria, meanwhile, thrives. Her nonprofit has helped over 800 women escape abusive situations. She's written a book about her experience that became a bestseller. She's remarried to that social work professor, and they have a relationship based on actual partnership, mutual respect, genuine love. She tells me she's happier at 47 than she ever was at 25. "I wish I hadn't lost those years to Leonard," she admitted once, "but I think I needed to go through that to become who I am now." The woman who walked out in that green dress wasn't the woman Leonard married. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone I'm proud to be. The shop on Maple Street still stands, thriving despite gentrification swirling around it. I own the building now. Victoria helped me buy it, so no landlord can ever threaten to evict me. Above the door, there's a new sign my mother would have loved: Iris's Tailoring, where every stitch matters. It's true in more ways than the obvious. Every dress I make, I think about what it means, what message it sends, how it makes the wearer feel. I've turned down commissions that felt wrong, that seemed designed to harm rather than celebrate. I've made dresses for women escaping abuse, starting over, reclaiming their bodies and their stories. Each one is made with intention, with care, with the understanding that clothes are never just clothes. They're statements about how we see ourselves and how we want the world to see us. Sometimes late at night, when the shop is quiet and I'm working alone, I think about that moment when Leonard first walked through my door. I was so desperate, so scared, so focused on survival that I almost ignored every warning sign. I almost participated in his cruelty because I needed money. That terrifies me still. How close I came to being complicit, how easily desperation can compromise our values. But I also think about the moment I decided to tell Victoria the truth, how that choice rippled outward, changing both our lives in ways I never could have imagined. Mr. Patel was right about truth needing a gentle hand. You can't force people to see what they're not ready to see, but you can create conditions where truth becomes visible, where lies become unsustainable, where cruelty is exposed to light. That's what the two dresses did. They made Leonard's intentions tangible. They gave Victoria physical evidence of something she'd felt but couldn't name. They turned emotional abuse into something undeniable, something people could understand even if they'd never experienced it themselves. The dress that hangs in that museum exhibit has been seen by over 1 million people now. It's traveled to 15 cities, sparked countless conversations, helped women recognize their own experiences in Victoria's story. It's just fabric and thread, but it's become a symbol of something larger: the invisible violence of impossible standards, the cruelty of love wielded as control, the power of refusing to participate in someone else's harm. Victoria jokes that it's the most famous dress I'll ever make, and she's probably right. But I'm okay with that. If that dress helps even one woman recognize abuse and choose to leave, then every late night I spent sewing, it was worth it. I measured Leonard's wife's dress size, and in doing so, I ended up measuring his heart. It was small and cold and cruel, dressed up in expensive suits and polished words. But measurements don't lie, not the ones on a tape measure, and not the ones that matter. Victoria measured up to impossible standards forced on her and still came out stronger. Leonard measured his worth in money and status and control, and discovered those measurements mean nothing when you've lost your humanity. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust what you see, speak what you know, and refuse to stitch cruelty into the world. So that's my story. The day Leonard Drake walked into my shop, he thought he was commissioning a dress. He had no idea he was tailoring his own downfall. Some people say I should have minded my own business, that what happens between a husband and wife isn't my concern. But I learned something important that year. When you see someone trying to tear another person down, staying silent makes you complicit. When you witness cruelty, ignoring it makes you part of the cruelty. I'm just a seamstress. I don't have money or power or status. But I had knowledge, and I had a choice. And I chose to stand with a woman who needed an ally. Victoria didn't just get her money back. She got her life back, her voice back, her power back. She built something beautiful from the wreckage of her marriage. And Leonard, he lost everything he thought made him valuable. His wealth, his reputation, his freedom, his control. Turns out, when you spend your life measuring others, you never notice how small you've become. When you build your identity on tearing others down, you construct a foundation made of sand. When you confuse cruelty with strength, you discover that actual strength looks nothing like what you imagined. The two dresses still tell their story. One hangs in a museum as a warning. This is what happens when love becomes control, when partnership becomes possession, when a person becomes a project to fix or discard. The other exists in photographs, capturing a moment when a woman reclaimed her narrative, her body, her worth. Together, they remind us that we're measured not by what we wear or weigh or own, but by how we treat people when we have power over them. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about karma, justice, and everyday heroes who choose courage over comfort. Share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right always matters, even when it's scary, even when it costs you something. Drop a comment telling me, would you have confronted Leonard sooner or played the long game like Victoria and I did? Your answer might surprise you, because the truth is, none of us really know what we'd do until we're standing in that moment, feeling the weight of the choice. And remember, character isn't measured in dollars or dress sizes or Instagram followers. It's measured in moments when no one's watching, when doing the right thing costs you something, when silence would be easier, but speaking is necessary. We're measured by whether we walk past suffering or stop to help, by whether we participate in cruelty or refuse it, by whether we use our power to harm or to heal. My mother used to say every stitch carries intention. If you sew with love, you create something that brings joy. If you sew with resentment, the garment never sits right. I think life works the same way. Every choice is a stitch in the fabric of who we are. Leonard stitched his life with cruelty, greed, and contempt. Victoria stitched hers with resilience, compassion, and courage. And me, I'm still stitching, one day at a time, trying to create something my mother would be proud of. Something that matters beyond profit, beyond survival. Something that says, I was here, I saw harm happening, and I refuse to look away. The shop on Maple Street stays open, a small light on a gentrifying street, still serving women who need someone to see them clearly and create something that celebrates who they actually are. Every dress I make is a reminder that we get to choose what we create in this world. We can measure people against impossible standards, or we can measure them with kindness. We can use our skills to harm, or we can use them to heal. We can stay silent when we witness cruelty, or we can speak up knowing it might cost us something. Leonard thought he was commissioning a dress. He was actually commissioning his own reckoning. He thought he was measuring his wife. He was actually revealing the exact dimensions of his own character. And those measurements, they were several sizes too small. Thanks for listening to my story. Until next time, keep stitching kindness into the world. It matters more than you know.